was a Trojan that's stealing information from online forms. So if you go to a bank, online bank or e-commerce site, the Trojan becomes active, captures the data from your online forms, login information, username, password, but also is capable of capturing a screenshot and then sending it off to a centralized FTP server, as in this case was the case. And when we got access to this server, when we found this piece of spyware, when we found the server, within the first week, about 10,000 people were compromised already. So this is real stuff. This is real, and interestingly enough, those servers organize the data incredibly well. So you see their social security numbers, credit card numbers, everything organized by country, so pretty much ready for sale. Organized by, in this case, it was over 100 countries. Now looking at the amount of instances of spyware on a particular machine, typically what happens is a machine is not typically infected just with one piece of spyware. Usually you have multi-infections because that's how spyware writers are working. They're trying to get as much as possible infections because maybe if this one doesn't stick, maybe another one sticks, for example. And so you see that the instances of Trojans is always in the range between 1.2, 1.6 instances per infected machine. So that's pretty static actually. But if you look on the other side, on the adware side, adware is clearly on the decline. While we saw the increase on the malicious part, on the Trojan side, we clearly see a decrease on the adware side. And it's probably part of it is some of those businesses are going out of businesses, and some of those people are refocusing the business. So I think there's probably good reasons why some of the adware is actually getting smaller. At the same time, the amount of malicious pieces are increasing. Last slide, talking about what is the state of spyware today. If you think about it, it's all about improving the distribution and the obfuscation methods. That's really what spyware writers are all about there. Leveraging various vulnerabilities. This year, the first 6 months of this year have been particularly fruitful. There were many security vulnerabilities that were not patched immediately. There was many time without patches available. This is clearly the windows that spyware writers take advantage of. But also at the same time, if you think about spyware, it's about targeting the user. It's no longer targeting the machine. In the early days, it was all the worms. When worms were circulating, it was all about targeting the machines. Now it's all about targeting the user through the browser, through the email, and through any other means that are typically client-facing application. Clearly a huge increase in use of rootkit type technology to stay obfuscated, to stay beneath the operating system. And there is actually a pretty interesting talk here at the conference tomorrow that I'm personally looking forward as well. But also looking at some packing encryption technology being used to really take advantage of being stealth, being under the hood, and not being detected. And again, the main reason, the main purpose spyware is on the market, it's always all about the money. Money is clearly feeding the spyware machine, and that's why the spyware issue is actually a real issue and not just an academic thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerhard. Next on our list is Dan Kaminsky, who many of you know. He is from Doxpera Research. Again, the bios are in the book, so I'm not going to go read them again. Dan?
So I have a friend. Friend's name is Tori. Good girl. I've known her for a couple years. And I'm over her place, and I'm talking with her mom. And her mom says, "Oh, Dan, can you take a look at my laptop? It's been broken for a little while." And I say, "Sure, I'd be happy to." And she goes and she takes it out of the closet. And I say, "Why is it in the closet?" And she says, "It's been there for the last 6 months." And I say, "Why?" And she says, "Well, it doesn't work." And predictably, I find out that this machine had come down with enough spyware and adware that it was effectively useless. And then I thought about it. This was one machine in one closet. There were probably millions of other machines that have been replaced, that have been sent for servicing. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of damage have been done. No one went to jail. No one even got sued. If you want to know why spyware happened and why it's continued to be a problem all these years, I have nothing but respect for the level of buy-in that some of the bigger spyware vendors have gotten from the FTC. I mean, the other way around, more along the lines of the fact that there have been standards that have been applied to. But if you look at it, you can kind of say it as, you've taken a lot of money and you've caused a lot of damage. How about you change your ways and then you don't have to give that money back and you don't have to go to jail? That's kind of what these guys were told, and that's why this is a continuing problem. It is not actually technically feasible to stop spyware. We can't even stop execution of arbitrary code on game consoles. Game consoles with arbitrary, completely fixed hardware, the most investment in cryptography you can get, and completely fixed software, and these boxes still get arbitrary execution of code. You will not be able to solve this problem technically. We can react for a little while until the rootkits get better. But at the end of the day, the virus authors never came forward and sued because the virus authors assumed if they ever came forward, they'd go to jail because that's what you do to criminals. I think there's been far too little willingness to admit that what we are dealing with is a large-scale organized crime problem. Whatever we've been treating it as, it hasn't been that. Now, in terms of technical terms, there is the issue of back channels. If you think you will be able to stop spyware from communicating back to its sources, we live in a networked society, and your devices have so many ways of going back home. One way that is actually useful to track down spyware on your network, and we have to admit we are all living under limited resources, monitor your DNS logs. I'm serious. If you have a couple boxes that everything in your organization goes to, watch for lookups, and watch for lookups to hosts that seem suspicious and then there's no actual communication there. Because you can, as I've shown, you can move all your communications over DNS. If you are just sort of accepting the existence of spyware on your network by saying, well, it's not really causing a problem, users still being able to get their job done, spyware actively modifies the way that desktops are functioning. Among other things, several pieces of spyware actually full-on add functions to Internet Explorer that are effectively download and install code from URL. Like, that's not a joke. I've pretty much seen that exact ActiveX function marked as safe for scripting from one piece of spyware. So it happens. So if you look at the penetration rates, you actually can foresee with the rest of the ecosystem, with the base operating systems getting more secure, you start seeing what's your best route as an attacker to attack a particular machine. Well, look for how spyware has modified that machine. And I wasn't going to mention this, but it's I unfortunately have to. Who configures that machine? Well, you've got, obviously, the operating system vendor, but you also have the person who sold you the laptop. People pay for stuff to go on laptops. And it's worth investigating, worth being aware of, can a spyware vendor, because they make a lot of money, can they walk over to Dell and say, please put our spyware on this machine? Have they already? I specifically haven't, after the whole Sony thing went down, I pretty much avoided Sony laptops. Not because I knew, because there were certain fights I didn't feel like getting into. In terms of other stuff, it would be useful. You can't stop the matter technically. You can create standards that delineate the field very strongly between this is legitimate code that the user has agreed to run, and this is illegitimate code where we throw people in prison. This is the goal of any kind of rulemaking, to make a very strong distinction. Because right now, as long as everything's gray, no one goes to jail. One thing that would be a very clear and helpful addition would be if you have code that claims to be legitimate, it must have some visible effect. And you must be able to right-click on the visible effect, and in under 10 seconds, the thing has to die and never come back. You see an ad you don't like, you right-click it, it goes away. You see a pop-up that appears to be part of something else. You have to know where it came from. We do this for political ads. I approved this message. You need to know who approves messages, and you need to have a way to get rid of it. And if that causes side effects in terms of shareware or freeware on your system that doesn't work anymore, you get an opportunity to tell people that, but you have to make it so it is very clear and quick. The fact that we need to have third-party software to remove spyware from machines is a failure, unfortunately. That's pretty much what I got.
Thanks, Dan. That should make things interesting further down the road. Next on the panel is Andre Gold, CISO from Continental.
So it definitely does absolutely make things interesting. I think with most organizations, Continental's no different. We have a lot of Tories, within our environment as well. We have Tories out at the ramp, within reservation centers. that utilize their laptops, their respective desktops for work-related activities, but also find opportunities to do other things, such as find sites and things like that on the internet, by which then represent an attack vector within the environment with the induction of spyware. I think what we've seen over the last 3 years, especially over at Continental, is that we no longer face the traditional malware type of demon, i.e. the virus and the worm out on the desktop. What we face now is that proliferation of the spyware and the respective adware. In our respective environment, it's caused a lot of lost productivity, in the sense that when we're going out there and we're trying to upgrade operating systems, roll out new machines and everything else, what we're seeing is that it's no longer very easy to just upgrade the environment. What we see is that we're trying to figure out ways in which we can combat and then remove the large amounts of spyware that are resident on the machines. At times, we're able to circumvent that and get into process earlier. A lot of times, we're not. And the reason why is because if a user can still do their job, if they can still be productive to the environment, then a slow machine is okay, especially if they've caused the machine to be slow in and of itself. And so it is unfortunate that we have to use third-party software, but from my perspective, we have to do what we have to do to combat the threat. Right? It's not a technology issue. It'd be a lot easier to elevate what I call the security IQ of our employees and everything else. I mean, you get you get flyers in the mail each day that say, hey, you've won a cruise to such and such, and you get all these other things, but a lot of people don't call the respective people now and say, hey, where's my free cruise and everything else. But yet and still they go to bad sites and say, okay, I'll click on this because it looks interesting and I've won an ad, and oh, by the way, now I've installed spyware, but hey, I don't want to tell anybody, and I can continue to work. So with that being said and everything else, we are looking at to try to take advantage of technology, third-party technology, as best we can. And part of that process looks at maximizing the footprint that we have on an existing machine out there. I think over time what's happened, especially from an operational perspective, is that desktops and laptops are no longer just simply productivity tools, but there's a huge amount of management overhead that you have to deploy on that respective asset to combat these new and evolving threats. And so what we're trying to do is looking at how we can maximize the investment that resides on that asset to begin with, to combat some of the spyware, adware, type of things that are out there.
Thanks, Andre. Last, we have Eileen Harrington from the Federal Trade Commission.
Thanks, Ari. Thanks, Dan. Let me tell you quickly what we're doing at the Federal Trade Commission in the spyware area, and what we're not doing, and what we can do and what we can't do. The FTC's job is not to be a cutting-edge research organization that is able to recite on any given day exactly what the latest developments in the spyware world are. That's not our function. We don't have those resources. That's what Gerhard and others do, and very generously share their training and expertise with us. Our job is to develop policy and draw lines and get it right, not get it wrong, in terms of trying to set some policy in this area. In the policy development area, our first challenge is to develop the intellectual capital that's necessary to understand what is happening in the marketplace, so that as we work at developing policy, we do it from an informed perspective. In 2004, we did a public workshop on spyware. In 2005, we issued a report. In 2000